Picture this. It is 1999. Inside a courtroom in California, there is a man standing before a judge.
Yeah, and he's facing a 3-year sentence in Corcoran State Prison.
Right. He is completely bankrupt.
Yeah.
His career is just, well, entirely destroyed at this point.
Completely gone.
And he delivers this statement to the court that is, it is just chilling to read.
It really is.
He actually told the judge, quote, "It's like I have a shotgun in my mouth, and I like the taste of the gunmetal."
Which is just a terrifying articulation of total surrender, you know?
Yeah.
You are looking at a human being who has entirely yielded to a disease that is systematically dismantling his life.
And yet, if you fast forward roughly 15 years from that exact moment, that same man is standing on a global stage.
Universally beloved, too.
Right. Pulling in $80 million a year is the highest paid actor in the world. Welcome to the deep dive, by the way. Today, we are exploring the anatomy of an epic comeback.
Which is such a fascinating topic.
It really is. Because for you listening, we want to look at how individuals who sit at the absolute pinnacle of success survive this massive plunge to rock bottom.
Exactly.
And more importantly, we want to decode the specific tangible tools they use to rebuild their lives and their legacies.
Which is vital because these stories, they usually get flattened into these simple rags to riches fairy tales.
Oh, totally.
And when we do that, we lose the actual mechanics of the recovery.
Right. And to understand those mechanics, we have pulled together an incredible stack of sources for this deep dive.
We really have a lot to go through.
We've got biographical articles and timelines on the life of Robert Downey Jr. We also have reviews of his deeply personal documentary, Senior.
And we're going to get into a detailed exploration of his martial arts practice, too.
Yes. Plus, we are weaving in a historical academic paper on a comeback from an entirely different century. We're looking at President Ulysses S. Grant.
It's a surprising connection, but it makes so much sense.
Okay, let's unpack this. If we want to really understand how Robert Downey Jr. rebuilt his life, we have to look at the environment that wired his brain in the first place, right?
You really do, because the root of the collapse wasn't just some sudden mistake. It was heavily baked into his childhood.
Yeah.
He was born in Manhattan in 1965. His father, Bob Downey Sr., was this highly influential avant-garde filmmaker in the underground scene.
Right, and his mother, Elsie Downey, was an actress.
Yeah.
But she was battling her own severe alcohol addiction, according to the sources.
Exactly. So he grew up in Greenwich Village, surrounded by what he later called a cacophony of creativity.
And the access he had was just unbelievable for a kid. He makes his film debut at age 5.
Playing a sick puppy in his father's movie, Pound.
Yeah, sick puppy.
Yeah.
And then by age 7, he's in this surreal Western called Greaser's Palace.
Right.
And he plays a boy who literally gets his neck slit by God.
It is a very intense, very adult world to just thrust onto a child.
I can't even imagine. It makes me think of an analogy. It's like his childhood was like building a mansion on a fault line.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Like the creativity and the access provided this beautiful architecture, but the drugs and the environment were these shifting tectonic plates.
And an earthquake was absolutely guaranteed because the real issue wasn't the avant-garde art itself.
Right.
It was the normalization of substance abuse within that art scene. His father allowed him to sip white wine and even gave him marijuana when he was just 6 or 8 years old.
That detail from the sources is just staggering to me. 6 or 8 years old.
It's hard to wrap your head around.
And Downey Jr. actually said later in life that doing drugs together was his father's only way of showing love. That was literally their bonding activity.
Well, if we look at the neurobiology of that, it explains so much of what happened later in his life.
Oh, so.
When a child's developing brain is introduced to psychoactive substances, especially in the context of parental bonding, it completely rewires their fundamental reward pathways.
Oh, wow. So it's not just a physical dependence.
No, the brain literally learns to associate the chemical dopamine hit of the drug with the emotional safety and love of a parent.
That is so heavy.
Yeah, it's not just a bad habit at that point. It becomes an integrated emotional framework.
Decades later, Downey Jr. actually confronted this history head-on. He made a documentary simply titled Senior, which he filmed before his father passed away from Parkinson's disease.
It's a really powerful piece of work.
It is. It acts as a tribute as a form of therapy, but it is also a direct confrontation of the 1980s Los Angeles cocaine scene.
A period that Bob Sr. bluntly referred to as 15 years of total freaking insanity.
Yeah, that quote says it all. And the documentary itself is so unusual.
What really stands out about it is its structure. You have this legitimate cut being made by the actual director, Chris Smith.
Right, he's trying to tell a cohesive, normal story.
Exactly. But then you also have this wild, impressionistic senior cut that's being directed by the ailing father right from his bedroom.
It is fascinating because it feels like Downey Jr. is finally allowing the chaos of his father to exist in the exact same room as the structure he needs for himself.
That's a really sharp observation.
He isn't fighting it anymore. He's just observing it.
Yeah.
But obviously, observing the trauma decades later is very different from actually living through the fallout in the 80s and 90s.
Right. And the fallout was catastrophic. The acceleration of his addiction really hit a tipping point around 1987.
That was when he starred in Less Than Zero.
Yes, he played Julian, a wealthy, spiraling drug addict, and our sources note that this role became his Ghost of Christmas Future.
But I have a question about this. We hear about actors playing dark roles all the time, right?
Sure.
Why did this specific role act as an accelerant for his real-life addiction?
Well, it's because of the psychological trap of his specific acting method, combined with his underlying neurobiology that we talked about earlier.
Ah, right, the childhood rewiring.
Exactly. When you are a highly empathetic actor who also has a deep childhood-rooted propensity for addiction, blurring the lines between character and self is incredibly dangerous.
So he was an addict playing an addict.
Right, and he ended up becoming a grotesque exaggeration of his own character. His immense talent actually became a smokescreen.
And you see people in his life desperately trying to pierce that smokescreen. The interventions were massive.
They really tried.
Jodie Foster actually shut down production on the film Home for the Holidays just to warn him. She told him he was balancing on a bar stool, and she was terrified for his life.
And then Sean Penn and Dennis Quaid literally dragged him to a rehab facility.
But those interventions failed. Why does they stick?
What's fascinating here is the paradox of high-functioning addiction, especially in the insulation of Hollywood.
Right, the Hollywood bubble.
The entertainment industry is a machine that is incredibly tolerant of chaotic behavior, provided the talent remains undeniable and profitable.
So the scaffolding of his stardom just kept him propped up.
Yes. He could always get another role, another paycheck, another enabler, which meant he never really had to face the actual friction of his choices.
Until the friction became impossible to ignore. Because by 1996, the Hollywood insulation totally failed.
It all comes crashing down.
He gets caught speeding down Sunset Boulevard in possession of heroin, cocaine, and an unloaded .357 Magnum.
Which is just an incredibly dangerous situation.
And then just weeks later, he's involved in the infamous Goldilocks incident.
Right, where he is so intoxicated, he wanders into a neighbor's house and actually falls asleep in their child's bed.
Which is terrifying for the family. And at this point, the industry can no longer protect him from the legal system.
No, and the legal system operates on an entirely different set of physics. Doesn't care about box office potential.
Right, the law is the law.
It operates on rigid, unbending boundaries.
Which culminates in that 1999 Corcoran prison sentence we talked about at the top of the show.
Yeah.
And even that didn't immediately fix things. He was paroled early, thanks in part to California's Proposition 36.
Right, and for context, Prop 36 was a measure that redirected nonviolent drug offenders toward mandated treatment programs rather than just keeping them locked in cells.
It was an attempt by the state to treat addiction as a public health issue.
Which is good in theory, but mandated treatment only works if the internal framework of the patient changes.
Exactly, because he gets out, lands a role on the hit show Ally McBeal, wins a Golden Globe, massively boosts their ratings.
And then gets arrested again.
Right. He gets arrested again and is promptly fired. He is left homeless, completely bankrupt, and entirely uninsurable in Hollywood.
This is the absolute bottom.
So, we arrive at the core question of this deep dive.
Mm-hmm.
How do you architect a comeback when your internal wiring is entirely compromised and you have zero external trust?
You have to replace the chaos with a completely new, rigorous operating system.
Okay.
For Downey, starting around 2003, that system wasn't just traditional therapy. It was a martial art called Wing Chun.
Right. This is a traditional Southern Chinese martial art. It was made famous by Bruce Lee and his master, Ip Man. But Downey couldn't just walk into a dojo, right? Our sources say he approached Sifu Eric Oram, who initially flat out refused to teach him because of his notorious unreliability.
Oram laid down an extreme boundary.
Yeah, he told Downey that if he missed a single lesson, he would chop off his toes and feed them back to him.
It sounds hyperbolic, sure, But Oram was establishing the exact kind of non-negotiable consequence that Hollywood had never provided him.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense.
Wing Chun became Downey's internal anchor. And the mechanics of the art are crucial here. The core philosophy of Wing Chun is, don't fight force with force.
Our sources say Downey spent 3 years just getting beaten up by a wooden dummy to internalize this concept.
It was a brutal physical process.
But wait, I want to push back on this a little bit. Is willpower ever enough on its own?
What do you mean?
It seems like he didn't just decide to get better, you know. He replaced the chaos with an incredibly rigid system, Wing Chun, and he required massive external boundaries.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you are exactly right. Willpower is a finite resource. It depletes by the end of the day.
Exactly.
True recovery requires rewiring your responses. What Downey was doing with Wing Chun was physicalizing his psychological recovery. He was applying these principles to his acting and his life. He would say things like, guard your center, get to the blind side.
So instead of trying to fight a craving head-on with pure willpower, which is fighting force with force, he was learning how to redirect that destructive energy.
Precisely. He was outmaneuvering his own impulses. He called it a spiritual warriordom.
But internal rewiring isn't enough in a vacuum.
Right.
You still need an environment that supports it. You need external stakes.
And those external stakes came in 2003 on the set of the movie Gothica.
Right. That's where he meets producer Susan Downey.
Yes. And she provides the ultimate emotional boundary.
She gives him an absolute non-negotiable ultimatum. Give up the drugs entirely or lose me forever.
Which is fundamentally different from Jodie Foster or Sean Penn expressing concern.
Right, they were just worried friends.
Exactly. Susan Downey tied her presence in his life to his sobriety. It was a binary choice, and it demanded real accountability.
But he also needed a professional lifeline, because the studio still wouldn't touch him at this point.
No studio would hire him because they couldn't get an insurance bond to cover him.
Because if he relapsed, the production would shut down and they'd lose millions of dollars.
This is where Mel Gibson steps in.
Yeah, this part is wild. Mel Gibson physically pays Downey's liability insurance bond out of his own pocket so he could star in the film The Singing Detective.
It's one thing for a friend to say, I believe in you.
Yeah.
It's an entirely different level of trust to underwrite a multi-million-dollar liability policy for you. Mel Gibson literally co-signed Downey's recovery.
So look at the architecture here. You have the internal discipline and neurological rewiring of Wing Chun. You have the profound personal stakes of Susan Downey's ultimatum.
And you have the professional grace of Mel Gibson.
That is a comprehensive system.
It really is. And the results of that system are undeniably massive.
Oh, absolutely. Director Jon Favreau famously fought the studio tooth and nail to cast Downey as Tony Stark in Iron Man.
Which was a huge gamble at the time.
Favreau argued that Downey's own life perfectly mirrored the flawed, brilliant, self-destructive billionaire.
The studio thought it was a massive risk, but the synthesis of actor and character was just perfect.
The film makes $585 million. It launches the most successful cinematic universe in history.
And completely reshapes global pop culture.
And it catapults him to global superstardom, eventually making him the highest-paid actor in the world.
But it wasn't just blockbuster money he was after.
No, he sought out incredible critical triumphs, too. He gets an Oscar nomination for playing Kirk Lazarus in Tropic Thunder.
Which was an intense method actor role involving a highly controversial skin pigmentation procedure.
Yeah, a wild high-wire act of a performance that could have easily ended a career if handled poorly.
Very true.
And then finally winning an Oscar for playing the bitter, calculating Louis Strauss in Oppenheimer.
Which is such a brilliant performance.
Yeah, what I find fascinating about the Oppenheimer role is he took a massive pay cut down to $4 million just for the chance to work with Christopher Nolan.
His priorities had completely shifted away from ego and paycheck.
And you see that shift in his off-screen life, too.
Yeah, giving back becomes a huge theme.
He begins serving on the board of the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, directly using his own experience in the prison system to help formerly incarcerated people rebuild their lives.
And he founds the Footprint Coalition.
Yeah, investing $10 million in sustainable technologies, like the French insect farming startup Insect.
Attempting to leverage his wealth for global environmental impact.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
It is incredibly easy to listen to all of this and think, well, that's a Hollywood story.
Yeah.
Of course, he recovered. He had movie stars paying his insurance and major directors fighting for him.
It feels uniquely tied to the modern entertainment industry.
Exactly. But the psychological mechanics of a comeback, the absolute ruin, the necessity of a rigid system, the reliance on a lifeline, those are deeply universal.
They really are.
To prove it, we are going to open up our historical source material, pivot away from Hollywood entirely, and travel back to the 1880s to look at Ulysses S. Grant.
It's a brilliant comparison, because by 1881, Ulysses S. Grant is a living legend.
Yeah, he's a former two-term U.S. president.
He is the victorious general of the Union Army who essentially saved the United States. He is an absolute titan of American history.
But after his presidency, he enters into a private banking venture with a young Wall Street wunderkind named Ferdinand Ward.
And this is where the earthquake hits for Grant.
By 1884, Grant discovers that Ferdinand Ward is essentially the Bernie Madoff of the 19th century.
Yeah, Ward was running a massive, devastating Ponzi scheme.
But I have to ask, how does a military genius, a man who out-strategized Robert E. Lee, get completely swindled in a business deal?
It comes down to a specific blind spot. Grant was a genius on the battlefield because he understood the mechanics of warfare and the psychology of his enemies.
Right.
But in civilian life, he had an almost naive trust in his allies. He assumed the men in his inner circle operated with the same sense of duty and honor that he did.
Oh.
So Ward manipulated that trust perfectly. He used Grant's legendary name to draw in investors while quietly siphoning the capital.
The betrayal leaves Grant entirely destitute. He's completely bankrupt. All of his family's money is just gone.
It's a total wipeout.
And as if that financial and reputational ruin wasn't enough, right at that exact moment, he receives a devastating medical diagnosis.
Yeah.
Terminal throat cancer.
It's just blow after blow. He is dying, he is broke, and his family is staring down the barrel of total poverty.
His entire legacy, everything he achieved in the Civil War, is on the verge of being overshadowed by this humiliating financial collapse.
He desperately needs a lifeline, the exact same way Downey needed Mel Gibson.
And his lifeline comes from arguably the most famous writer in America,
Mark Twain.
Twain steps in because he recognizes the historical tragedy unfolding, but also because he has his own crisis.
Twain's newly founded publishing company is teetering on the edge of bankruptcy.
Right. Twain needs a blockbuster book to save his business, and he knows Grant needs money to save his wife from poverty.
So Twain offers Grant a publishing deal with unprecedented royalty rates. But a deal only works if Grant can actually write the book.
And the physical reality of what Grant endured to write his personal memoirs is almost incomprehensible to think about.
Let's talk about that, because this isn't just sitting at a desk typing on a laptop. This is the 1880s.
Right. Pain management for terminal throat cancer essentially meant topical cocaine or swallowing pain medicine, which he couldn't even do.
Exactly. He is in excruciating agony. As the tumor grows, he completely loses his ability to speak. He can barely swallow water.
It's brutal.
He initially tries to dictate the book to an assistant, but when his voice completely fails, he is forced to write it all out by hand on small slips of paper.
He is literally racing against his own death. He sits on his porch, wrapped in blankets, writing for hours on end, day after day.
It is a level of discipline that really echoes Downey getting beaten by the wooden dummy.
Yeah. But the stakes here are literal life and death. He is guarding his center, fighting through blinding pain, solely to protect his family.
And he wins the race by inches. He completes the manuscript for the personal memoirs of Ulysses S. Grant in July 1885.
And he passes away just shortly after.
Just days later.
Wow. And the result of that agonizing work, the book is a massive commercial success. It leaves his widow, Julia Dent Grant, with $450,000 in royalties.
Which, in 1885 money, that is an absolute fortune.
It completely saves his family from poverty. And beyond the money, it secures his legacy. Today, historians still regard it as one of the finest, most vital military memoirs ever written in American history.
This raises an important question, though. When you look at Grant's final battle alongside Downey's recovery, a really profound truth emerges about human motivation.
What's that?
When Grant was just resting on his laurels as a former president, he was vulnerable. When Downey was just acting for his own ego and feeding his own addiction, he spiraled.
But the moment the motivation shifted entirely outward, the moment Susan Levin's heart was on the line or Julia Dent Grant's survival was at stake, they found a gear they didn't even know they had.
That outward focus is the ultimate anchor. You cannot outmaneuver your darkest impulses just for yourself. You have to fight for a purpose that is vastly larger than your own ego.
So we have covered a massive amount of ground today. For you listening, we really want to bring these two stories together.
Yeah, the anatomy of an epic comeback isn't magic, and it isn't just about pure willpower.
No, it requires confronting your messy past without flinching, exactly the way Downey did in the senior documentary.
It requires adopting strict, unforgiving new systems of discipline to rewire your impulses.
Right, whether that's a physical philosophy of Wing Chun or writing through the absolute agony of throat cancer.
It also requires intense humility. You have to be willing to accept a lifeline when you have nothing left to offer. You have to let a Mel Gibson or a Mark Twain hand you a rope.
So what does this all mean for you? You don't have to be a Hollywood A-lister or a U.S. president to use these tools.
Not at all.
Whether you are facing a massive career setback, a devastating financial hit, or a deeply personal crisis, these principles apply. Guard your center. Don't fight force with force. Redirect it.
Take the lifeline when it's offered, even if it hurts your pride.
And most importantly, find your why. Find the people or the purpose that you are protecting.
Because building a system of discipline is completely impossible if you don't know who you're building it for.
Absolutely. But examining these two stories leaves a really lingering question that we didn't fully answer today.
Oh, yeah.
Both Robert Downey Jr. and Ulysses S. Grant required a massive, devastating external shock to trigger their ultimate triumphs.
That's true.
It took the cold reality of a prison cell, a devastating financial betrayal, and a terminal illness to finally forge their legacies. It makes you wonder, is true lasting greatness only forged in the fires of absolute ruin? Or is it possible for us to learn these profound lessons, adopt these unyielding disciplines, and pivot our lives before we hit rock bottom?